I sit there and I think about it and how I got into this industry. It's so by chance, and we can't really be relying on chance anymore for recruitment. As our industry grows, we need the workforce. We're going to run out of human resource before we run out of material resource or financial resources. So it really comes down to making nuclear appealing, which that comes back down to having a little bit more showmanship or a little bit more sparkle at the end of the day. There's a lot of kids that will go into college and they say, oh, I want to work for this specific company because they're doing this really weird, crazy project. People dream about it, and we've got to make sure that people are dreaming about nuclear.
Welcome to My Nuclear Life. I'm Shelly Lesher. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking with Miss America. You heard that right. Miss America 2023, Grace Stanke. How? Well, she came to Miss America through Miss Wisconsin. When I spoke to Grace, she was finishing up the final project in her nuclear engineering degree at the University of Wisconsin. And that's how we met. I know her advisor, Paul Wilson, who put us into contact. I will admit I never thought much of the Miss America pageant, but Grace is a truly amazing person, and the pageant could not have a better representative. Nor could the nuclear industry. Grace and I covered a lot of ground on this episode, and she gracefully answered my silly questions about beauty pageants. But we covered a lot of information and things surrounding the nuclear industry, so please don't skip this episode. Have you graduated from Madison?
As soon as I turn in my last final here, then yes. So I am literally in my last class right now, and I'm just kind of wrapping up the final since getting back to the States here, and we'll be sending that in shortly. And then after that, that's my final piece. So, and I don't know if I can call myself a graduate or if I have to wait until like the final semester ends.
Yeah.
I'm out, and I'm not worried. I'll pass it. This one is a core design class, so I'm doing a lot of different work with scale. So the final, I'm just kind of redoing my senior design project, but in scale instead of MC&P. So it's been actually really nice. It was okay. I'm ready to be done. I'm excited to be done, but
Yeah, I haven't heard of scale, but of course I know MC&P.
Yeah.
What are your plans once you're finished with your degree?
Yeah, so right now I will be starting to work with Constellation in March as a core design engineer, and then I'll be combining nuclear advocacy into that role as well.
So that was like part of the job when you got hired? You said, I want to do this, or?
Yeah, a little bit. So I went through and I really wanted this to be something that hopefully the industry starts focusing on a little bit more, is this sort of outreach and public exposure. I want the industry to start actually representing and educating, right, is the biggest thing. And I went through and asked them, hey, can we make this a part of the role? We've seen the impacts as Miss America. I'd love to see this continue. And they agreed. So it was really unique. I got to kind of create this new position in cooperation with them. And we're still working out final details. You know, I had a call with them this morning to kind of work through some of that stuff, especially like some of this international advocacy work. It's a lot of like question marks as to, does this benefit both Constellation and me? Where does that fall? And so on and so forth.
So what have been the benefits of your advocacy with Miss America?
The largest thing is recruitment, I'd say, is the biggest impact that we can see firsthand. On social media alone, right, I have a lot of people, I'd say at least 2 or 3 a week, reach out and say like, hey, I never really considered a career in nuclear science or in nuclear engineering or anything like that, but now I'm really thinking about it. So I think that's the biggest immediate impact that we're seeing from this. In terms of the long term, I'd like to believe that I'm helping this transition into building more public support for nuclear. You know, that's not something that can be done in just 1 year. It takes a lot of time. So I'm hoping that I'm contributing to that in addition to working on the policy side of things. So like I've done a couple of meet and greet meets in DC where I'm meeting with over a dozen congressmen, congresswomen, senators, the whole organization to talk about nuclear science and pushing for specific things. So like Nuclear Fuel Security Act, the Advance Act, that sort of stuff.
Do you have to wear your sash when you go on meet and greets?
Not always. I said meet and greet, and I feel like that's the wrong verbiage to use. It depends on the event. So sometimes I wear it, But like, I was just at COP28, right? It wasn't fully appropriate to wear it when like I'm serving on panels and in the audience is individuals with the titles of like His Excellency. You know, I'm like, this is not appropriate for me to be wearing a crown and a sash. So I do kind of use like the discretion of the circumstance to determine whether or not I'm wearing it. Typically those like ultra professional events, I'm not wearing it. But like when I'm visiting a school, that's of course like something that's going to get a lot of attention and a lot of excitement going and show a different side to nuclear too, because sometimes we're seen as a super technical industry and a super boring industry too, which is a good thing, I guess, if we're seen as boring, that a boring day's a good day, right? But it's also important to show that we do have a lot of exciting innovation and a lot of incredible things going on too.
How do you kind of reconcile this dichotomy of being, you know what I'm going for here.
Oh yeah, I know what you're going for. All the stereotypes of both Miss America and a nuclear engineer.
Yeah, and how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, so a lot of it, I'm a very determined individual. I've learned that about myself recently, where I like to take on challenges. I like to take on difficult things in that sense. So for me, I've really enjoyed sort of this unusual dichotomy of the two. I think they both have something to learn from each other. I think the Miss America industry could learn a little bit more about the organization that the nuclear industry has in terms of structure and typically healthy workplaces and that sort of thing. And then on the other side, you know, I think the nuclear industry could use a little bit more sparkle and use a little bit more showmanship. And that sounds so cliche, but it sounds weird. But I sit there and I think about it and how I got into this industry. It's so by chance, and we can't really be relying on chance anymore for recruitment. As our industry grows, we need the workforce. Like, we're going to run out of human resource before we run out of material resource or financial resources, right? So it really comes down to making nuclear appealing, which that comes back down to having a little bit more showmanship or a little bit more sparkle at the end of the day. There's a lot of kids that will go into college and they say, oh, I want to work for this specific company because they're doing this really weird, crazy project. And it's like one of those companies that you're like, that's never going to happen, you know, but people dream about it. And we've got to make sure that people are dreaming about nuclear.
Okay, I have to ask, and I mean, you can cut out whatever you don't want.
Saucy, yeah.
So I'm older than you by some years. I know how I'm treated when I walk into a room full of old men. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a beauty queen. Mm-hmm. And you are young, you're a beauty queen, and you're walking in to a room full of old guys. Like,
yeah.
How do they treat you?
Yeah, so, you know, I'd like to say that it's not just old guys that judge me. I had an appearance recently where it was a room full of women, and they were from a different background than I, and it was definitely like I walked in and I'm like, you severely underestimated what I'm capable of. That happens a lot, you know, it's not something that's really isolated to one group of people. There's just sometimes people are always judging based off of looks, based off of what maybe the crown and the sash is the only thing that they see. It usually provides a very, very fun and very satisfying opportunity for me to prove people wrong in some way, shape, or form, which sounds really weird, but I kind of deal with all of that on a daily basis, whether it's walking into a room full of peers and they're like, well, why do we have Miss America here? What does she have to say? Versus walking into a room full of maybe Miss America people that are like, why do I care about nuclear energy? Or why should I listen to her? That sort of stuff happens everywhere. It's not really just one group of people is the point I'm trying to make that has those judgments. And a lot of it is just making sure that I'm putting in the work. I know where I stand. I know my worth. I'm very confident in who I am and what I bring to the table. I do not rely on a group or a room full of old men to provide me value. So that's just like me personally, that I'm very, very comfortable in who I am and what I deliver. And it's usually very fun to walk in a room and be severely underestimated and to watch people kind of, you know, have their minds changed. So, yeah.
I mean, I could learn something from you. I mean, that's amazing. So you're basically judged in every single environment you walked into.
I would say yes. I mean, I think everybody is in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, there are some safe spaces with people that I already know, but if I'm walking into a room full of strangers, typically there's a lot of what is going on here questions. And that's okay. I think it's perfectly valid, but I believe in open and honest communication and treating others with respect and openness and kindness. And as long as we start there, we're good. We're good. If we don't start there, great. I'll prove you wrong. That's fine.
And I will admit, you were the exception to my rule. I did judge the Miss America and Miss Wisconsin, the beauty queen, all beauty, no brains kind of thing. And everybody started sending me the Miss Wisconsin's a nuclear engineer. I'm like, no
way.
She can't be.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And so I was like, what? You definitely made me second guess and look at my assumptions. So, yeah, good job on that.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm glad.
It goes to I told one of my colleagues I was going to talk to Miss America. And she said, why does someone with brains go into a beauty pageant? I told her I'd ask you the question. So why, if you're smart, you go into beauty pageants?
Well, so one thing I want to say is that Miss America is not a beauty pageant. I am not the most beautiful woman in America. I never will be. I'm very okay with that. I'm very comfortable with that. I think we've established that. Miss America is a scholarship organization. So I went into it to help pay for my degree. And it's really more about who you are and what change you want to make in your community. We all have social impact initiatives, which for me, it was a focus on energy education and helping America transition to zero carbon energy. It was a focus on that. My first runner-up at Miss America, her focus was on helping homelessness. My second runner-up, she was all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Everybody has their own passion project, and Miss America is about creating a launch pad for a woman to create her career, essentially, which, it really has allowed me to do that as Miss America and as a nuclear engineer. I never thought these two things would intersect, nor would I think that they would help each other. Yet it has been really an incredible and unique experience that I'm very, very thankful for. Miss America is my full-time job for the year. Miss Wisconsin was actually my job at the time when I was serving as Miss Wisconsin. And it's a lot about a variety of giving back to your community in, I guess, the way that you would expect a Miss America would, but then also being able to slowly change the stereotypes. You're not the only person that I've met that's like, wow, I never watched Miss America, but now I think I might, or something along those lines where...
Well, I don't think I'm going to watch it.
No, it's okay. Yeah, you're okay. It just changes the thought process, but it's something that has been really incredible to see that and be a part of that. To me, Miss America is not the most beautiful woman. It is about being a good person. It's about representing hope and compassion and trust and love in humanity, which is something that we don't see enough of in the media, in my opinion.
I will say you are the most confident woman scientist I have ever met. Do you ever deal with stereotype threat?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's normal. That's just so that's one thing that when I speak with young girls and everything, I don't tell them it's going to be amazing and they're going to be treated equally. Because women in STEM, it's not going to change overnight. There's going to be sexism. There's going to be mistreatments. There's going to be stereotypes. There's going to be moments that you want to scream and you want to punch someone. That's just unfortunately normalized, but change is slowly happening, and change slowly happens by bringing it to the attention of individuals who are causing these situations. Change slowly happens by continuing to prove yourself. Change slowly happens by creating incredible role models for other people to know that this is a world that women can succeed. So to me, I always say, the women before me, they removed boulders. I'm removing only rocks. Hopefully my daughters only have to remove pebbles to get into this field. It just is going to take time and a lot of patience and a lot of strength, because society doesn't change on the flip of a switch, unfortunately.
No, and you are reaching a demographic that me, as a PhD in nuclear physics, school kids don't listen to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's true.
It is, right?
Yeah.
But school kids now are going to see Miss America as a nuclear engineer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little bit more about finding that relatability, right? Which I think the nuclear industry as a whole, this isn't just it's the nuclear industry as a whole has struggled to find its relatability to human beings. And like that sounds so strange, but
but it's true.
Yeah. So in that sense, this has kind of helped bridge that. And when I work with people in the industry, I'm like, okay, guys, you have hobbies, right? I hope you have hobbies. It's been interesting. So I've had a couple of audiences like be completely silent. And I'm like, this is not reassuring, but
it's not a trick question.
This is not a trick question. Just do you have hobbies? And obviously most people do. And I always recommend, that's what you capitalize on when you're speaking to people, when you're working with young kids. Find those common ground interests through your hobbies. So I typically start conversations off talking about water skiing or violin or Miss America or hiking or any of those other things that I'm interested in life. And then we get into nuclear or whatever it might be. It's never like, hi, I'm Grace. Do you want to talk about nuclear energy today? Like, that's not a good starter.
See, but that's what a scientist would do.
It is indeed. But maybe it's time we change the formula,
What are your plans to kind of change that formula to help the nuclear industry kind of enter a new age? Because I think we've been hiding for so long. If no one sees us, no one's going to shut us down. But you want to change that.
Yeah, so, as you said, we've been hiding it. The industry operated under no news is good news for so long. Well, now we have plants that are reaching their end of their license, and we're having these points where things are ending because everything has an end date. We can't keep power plants open forever, right? And without new plants to replace that, this industry is dead, right? So we have this lack of information out there because we operated under no news is good news. So then The Simpsons went wild. Hollywood studios genuinely just went wild with how it represented nuclear science. Every supervillain in every movie ever was created by nuclear science, it feels like, or some form of radioactive goo or like, some glowing green mystery thing that people are like, it's radiation, but it's not. And so we have a lot of misinformation out there or a lot of preconceptions that are just not coming from educated point of views. So for me personally, I'm not an expert in the nuclear industry. I'm just finishing up my bachelor's, right? Like I am not anywhere near to the level of expertise that you have or that any of my professors have had or most people in the industry have, right? But it's about the communication between people of just establishing that human connection to have these conversations and to always spark that curiosity, because I think specifically within America, electricity and utilities and that sort of side of our personal American lives is going to start getting affected greatly, whether it's reliable energy or the lack thereof or an increase in costs. And because of that, the American people are going to start getting angry. They're going to want to do something about it. So that's where, nuclear energy really has the ability to step in and say, hey, we can help these things. We can help create reliable and zero carbon energy and a constant, stable cost of energy, something that's expected, something that's manageable. So it's important for the industry. What I've been hoping to do, I talk about this position that I'll be entering in March. I'm hoping other companies follow suit and hire some individuals that are also just as passionate about communicating nuclear, who are excited to talk about both nuclear and just life in general. We've got to find that way to connect with humanity overall.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, that definitely has been missing. And the field is always talking about how do we do this? And my joke for years, it's not really a joke, has been we need a PR person. Like we need a PR strategy.
It's true.
And people laugh at me like, oh, nuclear doesn't do PR. It's like, why don't we do PR?
Well, and that's our fatal flaw. Yeah. It is. Like, it's our fatal flaw. I chuckle. So I had the opportunity to meet Susan Eisenhower at the International Atomic Energy Agency General Conference in Austria this year. And she's the granddaughter of President Eisenhower. She is super involved in nuclear energy policy, which is just super cool. She was kind of being spotlighted throughout the whole week because it's the 70th anniversary of Atoms for Peace. She was asked a lot of different questions about it. And she's kind of said at one point, she's like, the problem with the nuclear industry is we have zero strategy. We're just doing things, and we kind of work together, but we also don't at the same time, because it is all kind of like competition, right? But then we also don't really work together to help. We don't want to help each other too much, but we want to help each other enough to keep the industry going and just do the bare minimum. But we need to do a little bit more in order to grow. And that's where it's really interesting, because I'm like, she gets it. We don't have strategy. We don't have an overall public relations aspect at all for most places. It is something that I think PR has been improving within nuclear, but we've got to still kind of step it up a little bit.
Definitely step it up.
Yeah.
And there was just a new report from the DOE that called for millions of new jobs in the nuclear sector because of advanced nuclear reactor design. So there are jobs there.
I agree. Nuclear, we need people, and we need people now. We've got a massive portion of our workforce that's retiring, and we are going to have, hopefully, this big boom in building new nuclear. So in that situation, we need the workforce to actually build these plants, which we're going to have to train an entirely new workforce to do that from the ground up, because the only plant that's really been built in the past 3 decades in America is Vogtle in Georgia. Because of that, you've only got really one construction crew that's had experience building a nuclear power plant before. And obviously, there were people in and out throughout those 20 years of building that plant. But we've got to figure out how to fill that workforce, too.
How is building a nuclear power plant different than just any construction project?
Ooh, well, it depends on the plant, right? Because like looking at Vogtle, a lot of the times with these traditional massive light water reactors, so what power plants that are in operation right now are commercial operation right now. They are kind of designed custom to the location at which they are built. And obviously with nuclear, we have ourselves held to a very, very high standard of safety. So welders, there's always this talk about like nuclear grade welders. That's a 7-year training process to get to that point. And then, you make more money than any engineer ever will in their entire lives too. I will say that trades work, do it. If anybody listening to this podcast is like a high schooler and is like, listen, I don't think a 4-year degree is for me, go into like highly qualified trades work. Oh my gosh, there is so much money there. If I could go back and do it, I might have done that. So, but
be a nuclear welder?
maybe, you never know. So it's really interesting because there's just a very high level of skills that is needed. It's not just as easy as going out and hiring the first, construction crew. It's got to be a very, very qualified set of employees that help build a nuclear power plant. And it takes time. It's not a 3-month project. It's a multi-year project. Hopefully not decades. I would say that the fact that Vogtle took 20 years to build is very, very unusual. Very unusual. I hope will never happen again in America.
What is stopping the U.S. from building new power plants this year?
Interesting. Paul does a great job of describing this, and I'm going to use kind of his example. So we have this sort of like chicken and egg problem right now in the United States, where we've got the supply chain, and then we've got the people who actually want to build these plants, right? And the people who want to build these plants are saying like, yeah, we want to build, like, yeah, we're interested, but we don't really see the supply chain yet for it, so we're not going to commit or put any money towards it yet. And then the supply chain is like, oh yeah, well, we're totally ready to like supply what's needed for this stuff, but we just don't see the demand for it. So we've got these two sort of groups of people that are like, yeah, we're there, like, yeah, we do it, but like we also like are not in it, So at this point, what we really need is bold leadership, is what I say, in a sense of like, we need someone to just take that first leap, which is a scary thing. It's a terrifying thing, but we need that bold leadership. And unfortunately, nobody wants to be the first, right? People want to be the third or the fourth, but they don't want to be the first. So that's the sort of problem that we have within the United States right now, is going through and ensuring that we get someone to take that bold jump.
Are there a lot of oversight and regulations that are perhaps stopping people from taking that first jump?
I would say yes. I don't know exact regulations, but throughout the construction process, a lot of the reasons why Vogtle went as over time and over budget as it did is because like all of these random regulations and random things kept showing up where they needed to go through and change things, or they needed to go through and reapprove things, or things like that, where it just all of a sudden changed the plan. And changing the plan costs money, right? It takes time and it takes money. So I would say broadly, yes, that's coming from my limited experience with that, though.
You mentioned that you're going to be doing reactor design. Is that right?
Yes, core design. It'll be fun.
Core design. This implies new designs.
So core design is right now what I'll be doing is working in the commercial world. So commercial utility plants that already exist and kind of planning out their next cores and making sure they're all balanced and like pretty and everything. Pretty isn't the right word. Yeah, I was like, that's not the right word, but like they make sense and they're logical and they're nice and balanced and all of that. Maybe pretty too. You know, I think cores are pretty. They're beautiful to look at.
They are actually. I just had never heard it be called pretty.
I guess like I say that just in a very fun manner, just to help illustrate what it is. So
yeah, I mean mathematicians call equations beautiful, so you can call the core pretty for all I'm concerned.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
You mentioned that you travel internationally a lot. Is that normal for a Miss America to travel internationally as much as you do?
No, I don't think it's normal at all. The only international travel that Miss America used to do would be the USO tour. And sometimes the occasional like international appearance, but it definitely is pretty unusual. I've been to 6 or 7 different countries throughout the past 4 months as Miss America, actually. I just finished up my last international trip over the weekend. And it was something that I'm really thankful for. The nuclear industry really is a global community. Like it really, really is a global community. And I've been able to see that. I've been able to speak to people globally, not just within the nuclear industry, but outside of the nuclear industry too. So it's been awesome. I've enjoyed it. Plus I get to travel the world, which I had never had the opportunity to do that prior to this year. I was to the States and Canada, you know, but I had never been overseas. So it was really thrilling going to Europe and going over to Asia. I was in the Middle East. It's been really incredible.
Did you have to renew your passport?
I had to completely get a new passport. So I had one passport growing up as a kid, and then it expired, and I went through, and after I won Miss Wisconsin, I was invited to speak in Canada last fall, so I had to get a passport for that, and then thankfully, you know, I had the passport going into my year as Miss America then.
Did you wear the crown for your picture?
For
the passport picture?
I didn't have, no, not when it's going to last 10 years, absolutely not.
That would have been hilarious. Why the interest in Miss America internationally?
For me personally, I always said Miss America's representing the entire country, right? You're more likely to have a son compete at the Super Bowl than a daughter compete for the job of Miss America, right? Like, this is an incredible opportunity. I'm the 95th woman in 102 years to become Miss America. Ever, yes. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, America's a global superpower. Why can't Miss America help speak and represent the nation? Which I had some very unique opportunities. You know, the International Atomic Energy Agency conference that I spoke about, the Department of Energy brought me as an honorary delegate of the United States of America. So like things like that are happening where I wanted to make sure that Miss America sort of had this global influence. And I think it's something that should continue. It's incredible to bring American culture other places and to help bring other cultures back to America as well. I have truly, truly enjoyed my time with international travel. It's been awesome. And I hope it continues.
Is this type of scientific platform unusual in Miss America contestants?
Yes, very unusual. Not normal at all.
Do you think that helped set you apart from other contestants?
I have no idea. You know, I go through and all of the women I competed with at the state level, at the national level, at the local level, they are all incredible, incredible women. You know, I firmly believe that the women I competed with are going to be CEOs tomorrow. My Miss Texas is running for office down in Texas. Like, everybody is going to make a huge difference in the world in some way, shape, or form. And I just think that's so incredible. I'm honored to have represented them. And, you know, as I'm wrapping up this year, I'm excited to continue to join them all in the former life, as we call it.
The former life.
Yeah, the former life. The former title holder life. It's great.
Do you get to keep the massive crown?
I do get to keep the crown, and I get 2 sashes, actually. So I get to keep both of the sashes as well.
A formal one and a daily sash, I'd like to think.
Kind of. Like, they both start off, they're exactly the same, but you keep one really nice and clean for TV, and then the other one is kind of your, like, the one that gets dirty, which is okay. Like when I say dirty, it's not bad, but it starts to get a little bit discolored and the white isn't all consistent and like things like that. So it's just
the one
super
you wear
minor
to
things.
Elementary schools and the one you wear out and about, and then you have one for TV appearances.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Essentially. And I don't travel with both of them. Typically, I only travel with the wear and tear one. So, yeah.
The daily sash. Do you ever just wear it around the house?
No, not really. Well, when you think about it, like I said, this is my full-time job, right? I don't know many people that would go through and like continue their jobs, especially one like Miss America. It's a job that requires a lot of giving. And I'm so thankful for that. I am so incredibly honored to be in this role, but that's not fully sustainable of a lifestyle. It's not a job that's meant to be more than a year.
So it really is that demanding.
I just did the math. I caught up. I've done about 270,000 miles of travel in the past 11 and a half months. And, each event that you go to, you want to give those individuals a good experience. You want to impress them. You want to do good. You want to deliver a good speech or, maybe not necessarily a good speech in the audience's eyes, but an impactful speech. Or, you're spending a lot of time connecting with individuals depending on the event. So every event varies because like the Kentucky Derby, I didn't give a speech at. But then at COP28, yeah, I was giving speeches there to presidents and secretaries and like all of these individuals from countries of very high rank. So it's a very different circumstance that you've got to be ready for anything and be very flexible, very adaptable, and ready to do it all, essentially.
Is it tiring? I mean, because you're at the Kentucky Derby and you're still representing Miss America. You're still Miss America. People are going to recognize you and come up to you and talk to you. And you may not want to talk to anyone that day, but you still have to. Yeah, but
you got to talk to them. Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that is one of the struggles of the job where there are days where, you wake up and in a normal job, there are days where you're like, I'm just not vibing with it today. But you can never give that impression off as Miss America. But honestly, those days are far and few between. I'm very thankful that I've been able to have a very unique year where I've been able to really kind of focus mostly on my social impact initiative, which is mainly nuclear energy and talking about that, which is for me, my passion project. I could talk about it all day long for the rest of my life. I love it. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned earlier that you got into nuclear engineering by chance.
Yeah, chance is a unusual word. So it's more of spite is the reason. So as I mentioned, I've learned about myself.
Did you say spite?
Spite, yes.
I got my PhD on spite.
Yes, you get it.
Yes, I do. I certainly do.
It's a great motivator.
Totally agree. Where did your spite come from?
Yeah, so I was a 16-year-old teenage girl, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, as any 16-year-old teenage girl does. I had a direction. I liked math. I liked science. I saw my dad do civil engineering throughout growing up, so I knew I liked engineering, but I had no idea what kind. And I was touring colleges, and I'm going through the list of different types of engineering, and I see mechanical, and I'm like, that's too basic, right? Like, that's just, everybody does mechanical. And I look at electrical, and I'm like, my brother went into electrical. There is no way I'm following in my brother's footsteps, right? I look at civil and I'm like, I saw my dad do it. They're just dirt pushers. Like, I'm like, I don't want to do that either. And I get to nuclear engineering. And honestly, I know nothing about nuclear at this point. I learned about the bombs in World War II history. And I was like, there's maybe 2 reactors in all of America, like maximum. This isn't a thing. And I see nuclear engineering. And honestly, the only thought that goes across my mind is I'm like, imagine what a flex it would be to say I'm a nuclear engineer. Like, you can't go wrong with that. So 16-year-old teenage Grace, we drive back home from these college tours and I'm talking with my dad.
I'm guessing someone told you you couldn't do it.
Yeah, so my dad basically said, my dad went, Grace, don't go into nuclear. There's no future there. And 16-year-old teenage me said, watch me. So I majored in nuclear engineering. And then that first semester in school, I always say I learned where nuclear exists all around us. I learned that there is indeed more than 2 reactors in America. There's 93 now to this day. I learned how there is radiological science in smoke detectors, in granite countertops, in bananas, in all of these different things that affect your daily life. And then the second semester, I joined a fusion research lab, and that taught me what nuclear can be, is what I like to say, where then it showed me this sort of future of what would happen if we actually embraced nuclear science to its fullest extent. So ever since then, I've been sold, and I'm like, listen, why isn't everybody screaming this from the rooftops and like thrilled about nuclear science?
Yeah. You know, when I went into nuclear research, one of my advisors said, why? There's no future in that. And I'm like, joke's on you, because I have grant money and your field doesn't. So
yeah. I love that. I love that. Joke's on you. It's a great motivator. Spite and just that whole, like, you present a challenge, a lot of people will take it.
Yeah, and all you have to do is tell some teenage girl that they can't do something or they shouldn't do something, and it's just like, oh, you watch.
Uh-huh. All right, teenage girls out there listening to this, don't go save the world. You cannot save the world, okay? You must not.
It's not possible. Oh my, I hope teenage girls are listening to this podcast. That'd be awesome. They're learning something about nuclear science.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. Don't worry.
I hope so. It turns out my audience is a lot of nuclear people that want to learn about other parts of nuclear. So I really hope that people listening to my podcast see the other side, that Miss America isn't the stereotype that scientists think you are.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope people see that. But I also know that Miss America is not the defining point in my life. This isn't the keystone. This isn't the most significant achievement I will have. I hope that there are other things in my life that overshadow this significantly. I'm very proud of my time as Miss America, and I'm honored, and I think that this has done incredible things for the industry, too, to bring attention to it in a different way. I've gotten international attention in terms of media that's been in support of nuclear and starting conversations surrounding nuclear. But it's also exciting because for me personally, I know that, you know, Miss America is not the defining point.
Wow. What do you want to accomplish then? If this is just a stepping stone, like what's in the future?
Isn't that the question everybody wants answered, right? Like, I don't know. I have no idea. At some point in my life, I want to start a family. I want to do things like that, but I don't know exactly what I want to do. Maybe I want to push to run for office one day. Maybe I want to push to become a chief strategy officer of a company one day. I don't really know exactly what the end goal exactly looks like, but I think that that's exciting because I'm always open to new opportunities and trying new things. All I know is I will definitely be affiliated with nuclear in some capacity just because this has been such a joy to learn about and such an incredible passion of mine that I will ensure that that continues.
What would success look like to you as far as your advocacy goes?
As far as advocacy goes, I would say knowing that we have enough employees to fill the workforce, first of all, is the biggest thing. Second of all, building new reactors. So end goal of, by the end of my lifetime, I would love to see nuclear energy producing about 40% of America's electricity. That's reliable energy and that's zero carbon energy. You know, those are two things that are great, and it's providing high paying jobs to people in their communities. It's providing millions of tax dollars into those communities. To me, it's a no-brainer, and I hope that the rest of America sees that.
So right now we're at what?
20% in America.
We're down to 20?
20% of America's electricity, it comes from nuclear power, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it used to be a little bit bigger, but it's something that it has been. We have a lot of plants that have been decommissioned that are now being purchased out. And it's interesting because, like, Palisades nuclear plant in Michigan, right? So just over the pond from us. You're actually in Wisconsin, so you know what I mean here. It's funny because I'll do these podcasts and it's never Midwesterners. But Palisades nuclear power plant decommissioned last year at some point, and a co-op bought out the property and they're applying for relicensing of it and to build SMRs there, which is incredible because you've got this kind of like little life cycle that's going on of these plants where they get decommissioned and then they'll be replaced with the next generation reactor design. But I find it interesting because it's not a massive company that bought this property out. It's a co-op, meaning it's people from rural Michigan that want clean, reliable, accessible electricity for their customers, which is something that is just so unique to me to see that co-ops are really starting to step up and say, hey, we want to build an SMR. We want to create this as an energy source for our clients, which I think is just like cool. Interesting. And it's happening in Wisconsin too. The Dairyland Power Co-op based out of La Crosse actually is super interested in SMRs as well. So hopefully we will have SMRs in Wisconsin in the near future.
That would be fantastic because they just decommissioned completely one of the plants.
Yes. I was at their annual meeting this year, and they had announced that where they're like, "Yep, we are officially like done decommissioning that plant." And I'm like, "Wow, That's crazy. But it also goes to show that decommissioning processes, you have this starting piece of land and now it's left as the land it started as, right? Like it looks completely fine.
Yeah. So is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to mention?
The biggest thing, with your audience being primarily nuclear people, I encourage everybody to share their story, whether they utilize social media, whether they go back to their high school. I'm out here doing advocacy work, but my story may only connect with 2 out of 100 people, but your story might connect with 20 out of 100 people. So it's really important that everyone is talking about their work, taking pride in their work, taking pride in being a nuclear affiliated individual, and be proud of that. Show it off. Give it the little sparkle. It's great. Start your family Thanksgiving fight, start your family Christmas fight, whatever time of year it may be. It's a ton of fun. Highly recommend.
Thank you for listening, and thank you, Grace, for taking time out to speak with me. Please visit our website, mynuclearlife.com, for links of interest, our email address, and information on how to access bonus material. Until next time, I'm Shelly Lesher, and this has been My Nuclear Life.